everyone. Buckle up because tonight we're diving deep into some seriously mind-bending stuff.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about the Brazil UFO Flap of 1986.
That's right.
Hundreds of sightings.
Hundreds.
Lights in the sky, objects, doing things that seem physically impossible.
Absolutely.
It sounds like a sci-fi blockbuster, right?
Yeah, it does.
But this was real life for people all over Brazil.
I mean, you're familiar with Roswell, right?
Of course.
Well, the Brazil flap was even bigger in terms of sheer numbers of sightings.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
It was a massive wave of reports spanning months, and it completely gripped the nation.
I bet.
The source material even talks about how the Brazilian Air Force started calling it Night of the UFOs.
Wow, Night of the UFOs. That's chilling.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
Okay, so paint us a picture here. Where exactly were all these sightings happening?
Think major cities,
Mhm.
São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro,
Okay.
but also smaller towns, rural areas.
Got it.
What's intriguing is that the reports were remarkably consistent despite coming from all walks of life. We're not just talking about vague bright lights either.
Okay, good.
People were describing specific colors, shapes, and movements that defied easy explanations.
Okay, let's unpack this. What kind of details were people reporting? Give us the specifics.
Witnesses described lights of varying colors,
Yeah.
some pulsating, others stationary.
Okay.
Some reports even mentioned beams of light emanating from the objects.
Wow.
And the movements were often described as vector-defying, meaning these things were changing direction in ways that our aircraft simply can't.
That's wild.
It is.
It's one thing to see a light in the sky, but to have so many people describing these complex movements, it definitely raises the intrigue factor.
For sure.
Let's talk about the people behind these reports.
Yeah,
The source material mentions some pretty compelling eyewitness accounts, right?
absolutely.
Okay.
One that stands out is Maria da Silva's story.
Okay.
She was in São Paulo when she saw this large, disc-shaped object hovering over her neighborhood.
Wow.
She described a bright white light emanating from it and this low humming sound. She said she was both fascinated and terrified.
I can only imagine. It's like your brain is trying to make sense of what your eyes are seeing, and it just doesn't compute.
Right.
And the source material mentions a truck driver, right?
Yes.
Driving on a remote highway and having this crazy encounter.
Right, Carlos Santos.
Yeah.
He described seeing multiple lights darting across the sky in these unpredictable patterns.
Wow.
He actually used the word intelligently controlled in his report, which is pretty thought-provoking.
That is.
He said it was thrilling and terrifying at the same time.
That's incredible.
It is.
It's amazing how many of these witnesses were ordinary people just going about their lives.
Right.
It wasn't just UFO enthusiasts looking for something strange in the sky.
Yeah.
It really adds weight to their stories, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
And that's why the Brazilian Air Force,
Yeah.
FAB, took these reports so seriously.
They had to, right?
Oh, yeah, they were concerned about national security and public safety,
Yeah.
so they launched a full-scale investigation.
Wow. A full-scale investigation.
They were collecting everything, eyewitness reports,
Yeah.
radar data, you name it.
Wow.
They even brought in experts from various fields to try to figure out what was going on.
So what did they find? Did they manage to debunk all these sightings?
Well, here's where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
The FAB's official conclusion was that most sightings could be attributed to things like weather balloons,
Okay, sure.
misidentified aircraft, or atmospheric phenomena.
Uh-huh.
But, and this is a big good, but they also acknowledged that a small percentage of the sightings remained unexplained.
Wait, are you saying the FAB actually admitted they couldn't explain some of these sightings?
That's right.
That's huge.
It is.
Did they give any hints about what those unexplained cases might have been?
They were pretty tight-lipped about it, but the
Yeah.
fact that they acknowledged the unknown is significant.
Yeah.
It suggests that even with all their resources and expertise, they couldn't definitively dismiss every report.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. We've got these unexplained cases, the government's official investigation.
Right.
I bet the media had a field day with all of this, right?
Oh, absolutely. The Brazil UFO Flap became a global sensation.
Wow.
Headlines screamed about UFO invasions and close encounters.
Oh, man.
People were glued to their TVs, newspapers were flying off the shelves, and everyone was talking about UFOs.
It's incredible how something like this can capture the world's imagination.
It is.
I mean, the idea that we might not be alone in the universe is both exhilarating and a little terrifying, wouldn't you say?
It really is. And the Brazil UFO flap didn't just make headlines. It also ignited a firestorm of debate and speculation.
Oh, I bet.
Some people saw it as definitive proof of alien visitation,
Right.
while others clung to more skeptical explanations.
That makes sense. You've got these credible witnesses describing these mind-boggling things,
Yeah.
and then the government admits they can't explain everything.
Right.
It's the perfect recipe for a UFO frenzy.
Exactly. And this brings us to a really important point.
Yeah.
While the Brazil UFO flap is fascinating from a purely observational standpoint,
Yeah.
lights in the sky, strange objects, it's crucial to remember that this was a deeply unsettling event for many people.
That's true. We've been focusing on the wow factor.
Right.
But it must have been pretty unnerving for those who experienced it firsthand.
It was.
Imagine looking up and seeing something that completely defies your understanding of how the world works.
Absolutely. And that's where the psychological aspect comes in.
Yeah.
Think about Maria da Silva's experience.
Uh-huh.
She saw this massive object hovering over her neighborhood.
Right?
And it wasn't just the visual that impacted her.
Okay.
She described this low, humming sound that seemed to vibrate through her whole body.
Wow.
That kind of sensory overload can be incredibly disorienting.
It's like something out of a nightmare.
It is.
And then there's Carlos Santos, the truck driver.
Yes.
He talked about feeling the sense of dread like he was being watched.
Right.
It's interesting how these reports go beyond just visual sightings. There's often this emotional component, this feeling that something profound and perhaps even a little sinister is happening.
Right. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of this whole thing.
Okay.
The way the Brazil UFO flap played into the cultural and political landscape of the time.
Oh, yeah. You mentioned that this was happening during a period of upheaval in Brazil.
I did.
Could you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. So in 1986, Brazil was transitioning from a military dictatorship to a democracy.
Wow. So a pretty major shift.
A huge shift.
Okay.
There was a lot of social and economic uncertainty.
Right.
People were questioning authority, and there was this underlying sense of anxiety in the air.
So you're saying that this atmosphere of change and uncertainty might have played a role in how people interpreted these UFO sightings?
Exactly. Some researchers believe that this collective anxiety might have primed people to be more open to the idea of something extraordinary happening.
Okay.
It's like when you're already feeling unsettled, you're more likely to see patterns in the chaos and grasp at explanations that offer a sense of meaning or control.
That's a really interesting perspective.
It is.
It's like maybe people were looking for something bigger than themselves to explain the changes happening around them.
Right, and it's not just about psychological factors.
Okay. What else?
We also have to consider the influence of popular culture.
Oh, yeah.
In the 1980s, UFOs were everywhere.
Totally.
In movies, TV shows, books.
Right.
It was part of the zeitgeist.
Oh, yeah. E.T., Close Encounters. UFOs were totally having their moment in pop culture.
It were.
So do you think that this media saturation might have influenced people's perceptions of what they were seeing in the sky?
Absolutely. When you're constantly bombarded with images and stories about UFOs,
Right.
it's bound to shape your expectations and influence how you interpret ambiguous stimuli.
It's like if you prime someone to see a UFO, they're more likely to interpret a strange light in the sky as being extraterrestrial,
Right.
even if it has a more mundane explanation.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to approach these kinds of events with a healthy dose of critical thinking.
I agree.
We have to consider all the possible explanations, both conventional and unconventional,
Okay.
before jumping to conclusions.
Okay, so we've got psychological factors, the cultural context, the influence of the media.
Right.
But let's circle back to the unexplained cases for a moment.
Okay.
If we're being truly objective here,
Yeah.
is there any evidence to suggest that some of these sightings might have actually been extraterrestrial in origin?
That's the million-dollar question, and unfortunately, there's no easy answer.
Right.
The FAB's investigation, while thorough, couldn't definitively prove or disprove the extraterrestrial hypothesis.
I see.
They simply didn't have the tools or the evidence to make that kind of determination.
So we're left with this tantalizing mystery.
We are.
On the one hand, we have a mountain of intriguing evidence,
Yeah.
including eyewitness accounts from credible sources
Right?
and those unexplained cases acknowledged by the government. But on the other hand, we lack that smoking gun,
We do.
that irrefutable proof that would settle the debate once and for all.
Right. And that's where things get even more interesting.
Okay, how so?
Because while the Brazil UFO flap might not have provided definitive proof of alien life,
Yeah.
it did have a profound impact on the field of ufology.
Okay, let's dive into that. What kind of impact did the Brazil UFO flap have on how we study and understand UFOs?
Well, for starters, it highlighted the need for more rigorous and scientific approaches to UFO investigation.
Okay.
Up until that point, a lot of UFO research was anecdotal
Uh-huh.
and relied heavily on eyewitness testimony.
Right, and as we've discussed, eyewitness accounts can be influenced by a whole range of factors,
Exactly.
from psychological biases to cultural expectations.
Exactly. So after the Brazil UFO flap, there was a push to develop more objective methods for analyzing UFO reports.
Oh, that makes sense.
Researchers started using things like radar data,
Uh-huh.
photographic analysis, and even atmospheric modeling to try to corroborate eyewitness accounts and rule out conventional explanations.
That makes sense if you're going to make a claim about extraterrestrial visitation.
Right.
You need more than just people saying they saw something strange in the sky.
Yeah.
You need hard evidence.
Precisely. And the Brazil UFO flap also brought attention to the need for international cooperation in UFO research.
Yeah, it makes sense.
With sightings happening all over the world, it became clear that researchers needed to share information and collaborate if they were going to make any real progress in understanding this phenomenon.
It's like putting together a giant jigsaw puzzle.
Exactly.
Each sighting is just a small piece.
Right.
But when you start connecting them, you might start to see a bigger picture emerge.
Exactly. And the Brazil UFO flap, with its sheer scale and diversity of reports, contributed significantly to that global puzzle.
Wow.
It's a case study that continues to be analyzed and debated by UFO researchers today.
So what does this all mean for us, the people listening to this deep dive? We've explored the sightings, the government investigation, the cultural context, the impact on ufology.
Right.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but I think the most important takeaway is this.
Okay.
The Brazil UFO flap, while shrouded in mystery, reminds us that there are still things in this universe that we don't fully understand.
Yeah.
It challenges us to keep an open mind, to question our assumptions, and to be willing to explore the unknown.
It's a reminder that the world is a much stranger and more wonderful place than we often give it credit for.
Absolutely. And on that note, I think it's time to shift our focus to the human element of the Brazil UFO flap.
Okay.
After all, these weren't just lights in the sky.
Right.
They were experiences that had a profound impact on the people who witnessed them.
Okay, I'm ready to hear about that in part 3 of our deep dive. We'll explore the personal stories of those who encountered the unknown during the Brazil UFO flap. Welcome back, folks. We've been unpacking this wild story, the Brazil UFO flap of 1986.
A good one.
So many sightings, so much mystery. But let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about the lights, the objects, the government investigations, but what about the people at the heart of it all?
That's where it gets really fascinating.
Yeah.
We can analyze radar data and flight patterns all
Yeah.
day long, but the human element is what gives this story its soul.
It's easy to get caught up in the what of it all.
Right.
What were these objects? Where did they come from?
Yeah.
The how is just as important.
Absolutely.
How did these experiences affect the people who saw these things?
Imagine yourself in their shoes.
Okay.
It's nighttime, you're going about your business, and suddenly you see something that defies all logic,
Oh, yeah.
all your previous understanding of the world. That's got to shake you up on a fundamental level.
It's like your whole reality gets flipped upside down.
Right?
The source material talks about how some witnesses felt a sense of awe and wonder,
Uh-huh.
while others were gripped by fear and anxiety. There's this whole spectrum of human emotion tied into these events.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the immediate experience. Many witnesses described feeling changed afterward. Some felt a heightened sense of spirituality, a deeper connection to the universe. Others struggled with anxiety and uncertainty, questioning everything they thought they knew.
I was reading about a woman named Lucia,
Okay.
a school teacher who saw a bright disc-shaped object while walking home one evening.
Yeah.
She said it was so close she could feel the heat radiating from it.
Wow.
After that, she couldn't sleep, she had nightmares, she even started having panic attacks. It completely disrupted her life.
That's a powerful example of the lasting psychological impact these events could have.
Yeah.
And it highlights a really important point, the lack of support for witnesses.
Right.
Back then, there wasn't much understanding of the trauma associated with these kinds of experiences.
Right. You're suddenly thrust into this extraordinary situation.
Right.
And then you're expected to just go back to your normal life like nothing happened.
Yeah.
How can you go back when your whole worldview has been shattered?
Exactly. And if you try to talk about it, you risk being ridiculed,
Yeah.
dismissed as crazy or attention-seeking.
Yeah, you're labeled.
Exactly.
Wow.
The source material even mentions how some witnesses lost their jobs or relationships because of their UFO experiences.
It's tragic.
Yes.
They've had this life-altering event, and then they're further traumatized by the lack of support and understanding from the people around them.
It's a real catch-22.
Totally.
Do you stay silent and suffer in isolation, or do you speak out and risk further judgment and alienation?
Wow, tough choice.
It is. Luckily, things are changing.
Okay, good.
We're seeing more open discussions about UFOs, more research into the psychological impact of these experiences, and more support groups for witnesses.
That's encouraging.
It is.
It seems like we're finally starting to acknowledge the human side of the UFO phenomenon.
Right.
Not just the objects, but the people whose lives are touched by these events.
Absolutely. And this brings us to a broader point, the importance of empathy and open-mindedness when approaching this topic.
Yeah.
Even if we don't personally believe in extraterrestrial visitations, we can still listen to the stories of those who claim to have witnessed them with respect and compassion.
Well said, their experiences are real to them, and dismissing their stories out of hand does more harm than good.
Right.
It contributes to this culture of silence and shame that prevents people from seeking help or sharing their experiences.
Exactly. And you never know, by listening with an open mind, we might just learn something new about ourselves, about the universe, and about the limits of human perception.
Okay, so we've gone deep into the Brazil UFO Flap of 1986. We've explored the sightings, the investigations, the cultural context, the psychological impact. It's been quite a journey.
It has.
What's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with?
I think the most important thing is to remember that the Brazil UFO Flap, like all great mysteries, raises more questions than it answers.
Yeah.
It challenges us to think critically, to be open to new possibilities, and to recognize that our understanding of the universe is constantly evolving.
It's a reminder that there's still so much we don't know about the world around us.
So much.
And that's pretty exciting. It keeps us curious, keeps us searching, keeps us looking up at the sky with a sense of wonder and possibility.
Exactly. So the next time you see a strange light in the sky, don't just dismiss it.
Good advice.
Take a moment to consider the possibilities, to imagine the stories behind the sightings, and to appreciate the profound impact that these experiences can have on our understanding of ourselves and our place in the cosmos.
Beautifully put. And that wraps up our deep dive into the Brazil UFO Flap of 1986.
I hope you enjoyed it.
We hope you enjoyed the ride and that you'll continue to explore the mysteries of the universe with an open mind and a curious heart.